Hello everyone, my name is Fatima and welcome back to the Race Edit. And if you're new here, welcome to the Race Edit and welcome to a new video. You guys, before we get into the nitty-gritty of this, I just want to put out a disclaimer. Just a quick little disclaimer. Some of the things that I mentioned in this video when it comes to climate change, etc., it's not my vocation, it's not my expertise. I'm just a girl who's curious about Formula One sustainability strategy, and I happen to love researching things, and that's where the idea for this video came about. I had questions about the logistics of Formula One, and I've always been more interested in what they've been doing to make sure that the sport is quite diverse and inclusive as well. So everything just kind of came together for this video, which I was really happy about. I will be linking down below all the research that I used for this video. So if you are, by the end of this video, interested in learning more about Formula One sustainability strategies, all of that information will be there for you. With that being said, let's get right into it. As Formula One fans, we tune in 23, now 24 weekends of the year to watch our favorite sport. While we love the fast cars, the strategies, the teams, the drivers, and the drama, do we ever sit back and think about what exactly it is that goes into what makes a Grand Prix weekend a Grand Prix weekend? Not a lot of us do. We see the glamour, but we forget about everything else behind the scenes, really. And that's kind of what this video is about. So let's talk about sustainability for a moment. What is sustainability? In the 1987 Brundtland Report, which was published by the World Commission on Environment and Development, they defined sustainability as meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. In a McGill University article on what sustainability is, they indicated that there are three dimensions of sustainability. There's environmental, social, and economic sustainability. For the purposes of this video, I will be focusing on the environmental and social. And if I do mention anything economic, it's all pretty much opinion based. So let's look at the Formula One sustainability policy statement. In 2019, Formula One released their sustainability strategy with 3 key initiatives, and it was updated in 2022. And as of 2022, this is what their policy statement looks like. One is to achieve net zero carbon by 2030. The second is to leave a legacy of positive change wherever they race. And the third is to take steps to build a more diverse and inclusive sport by removing barriers, nurturing talent, and inspiring change. So, what is their push for sustainability? As we know, with the time, the impact and the everlasting effects of Formula One's carbon footprint is only going to continue to be put under the microscope, especially as the years go on. And as a corporation, I mean, it would be very negligent of Formula One to completely dismiss and ignore that instead of taking action into looking at the environmental steps that they can make in reducing their carbon footprint. That is really what I think their push for sustainability is. Additionally, with the social growth of the sport, they also have to be aware of this. And when it comes to being more diverse and inclusive, adding on to the growth of the sport with the way that the audience is changing and growing. Formula One, while they have always been a boys club, that's not necessarily the audience that they are hoping to keep and retain. While they want them there, the audience is growing and they need to move with the times to go along with their growing audience. So with that being said, in their updated policy statement from 2022, which was endorsed by F1 President and CEO Stefano Domenicali, he mentioned that they are committed to reducing the impact of its operations on the environment and to collaborating with its partners and stakeholders to make the sport and all of its events more sustainable and inclusive. And in this, they have 3 main objectives to maintain this. They have their environmental objectives, their social objectives, and their governance objectives. And in this video, I'll really just be looking at their environmental and their social objectives. What do we as fans need to know about these 3 objectives that they will be taking on? Well, what I found really interesting was their 2023 impact report, and it really does tell us everything that we as fans would need to know about the steps that have been taken and the steps that will continue to be taken for the overall goal of their 2030 net zero goal, and 2, of just what it is that Formula One is continuing to do. I'm going to go through these, and then I'm also going to go through some of the positive changes that I'm seeing and some of the things that I kind of question as well, and we'll go from there. As I mentioned, there are 3 objectives. And let's start off with their environmental objective. Now, they have 6 environmental objectives, but for the purposes of time, I'm going to be looking at 3 of them. So the first one is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions created by their activities with particular focus on their logistics and freight operations. In 2022, Formula One saw their carbon footprint reduced by 13% against their 2018 baseline. In 2023, all F3 and F2 cars used 55% sustainable fuels, and their goal is for 2027 to use 100% sustainable fuels. Now, we know with the new regulations that are coming up in Formula One specifically, all teams are working towards these new regulations, and one of the things that they have to work towards is ensuring that all the cars are using 100% sustainable fuels for the 2026 season going forward. Based on the 2023 impact report, the fuel emissions that are used by the cars on track is actually only 1% of their overall carbon footprint, but they do deem this changing over to sustainable fuels by 2026 as a necessary development to have a positive impact on the environment and wider society. So, how will Formula One achieve this? That is the question that you're probably wondering, and that is a question that I was wondering too. And lucky for us, they mentioned it in their impact report. One is the 100% sustainable fuels will be carbon neutral. The same amount of carbon used to produce the fuel will be the same quantity of carbon emitted from the engine. They're going to put in place production requirements such as renewable energy to target an 80% reduction in carbon footprint, which would include manufacturing and transportation, as they do recognize the amount of energy that will be used in manufacturing and transporting the fuel as well. The fuel development will be a drop-in fuel, so this can be used on road cars without modification. And finally, the fuel used in the engine will be created from a combination of non-food biosources, genuine waste sources, and carbon extracted from the air as well. So that's the fuel in a nutshell. Let's talk about their logistics and freight, because that is something that genuinely blows my mind, how Formula One manages to move all of these things around in the time that they race. Additionally, it's also a huge talking point. If there's one thing that the fans do talk about is the logistics of Formula One, how the races work. That is definitely something that I thought would be important to mention in this video. So as we know, in the 2024 season, there's 24 races, which means that Formula One is going to 24 different locations. And that includes not just the drivers, but also press, the freight, their engineers, and everything else in between. And when I say everything else in between, I literally mean everything else in between. That is all that Formula One hauls with them each race weekend. So let's talk about some of the changes that Formula One has made in order to be a bit more sustainable when it comes to their logistics. First thing that we know is some of the changes to the calendar. So for instance, the Japanese Grand Prix was moved to April this year instead of it being held in September, October as it has been in previous years. For Azerbaijan, they moved it to September instead of early spring. And then Qatar has been moved back to back with Abu Dhabi for the end of the season. Now, when you say this out loud, it's crazy because I was like, wait, why didn't they always have Qatar and Abu Dhabi back to back? Why was Japan held so far away from races closer to the region? It just doesn't make sense. And of course, I'm sure there was a reason as to why some of these races could not be held at these specific times. But if they're pushing for it now, I'm almost like, could they have pushed for it a bit more back then? But hey, I don't know, potentially. But the fact that they are switching the race calendar to make a bit more sense is great. And hopefully as the years progress, we'll start to see some race calendars that make just a bit more sense. Yeah. When it does come to their European races, I have to say that air transport really shouldn't be used when it comes to the European leg, unless, of course, absolutely necessary. And this is something that they have actually implemented, at least when it comes to the freight. We know they have partnered with DHL, and more specifically in 2023, there was a fleet of 18 new trucks that were used and that were powered by HVO 100 drop-in fuel, which was transporting around an average of 300 tons of vital freight per race. And that was 9 races in the European round. So I'll give them that. So these trucks, in comparison to the trucks that they used in previous years, were biofuel power trucks. And the difference that they saw with this is that it actually reduced an average of 83% carbon emissions that they did see in the previous years. So let's continue on with the trucks. I like that idea, Formula One. Yeah. Now let's move on to the second environmental objective, which is to comply with applicable legal and regulatory requirements relating to environmental aspects of their activities and operations. Based on the location and associated operation requirements, Formula One events are powered by either energy sources from the grid, temporary generators, and on-site renewables, or sometimes all three. Teams, the FIA, and other paddock users are to bring their own generators to support with peak energy demands during the race weekends. As for their fan zone, and this is something that I didn't realize I don't know, this is, you see, when you do videos like this, you learn a lot. Like, as for their fan zone, what I've learned is that this is not something that they did previously, but long story short, all fan zone kits are now stored in Europe, the UAE, and the USA. So meaning that all equipment used in races in these regions can be accessed at a more local location rather than flying a kit in from the US to the UAE. Now they have kits that are located in all local regions, so it's just easier and more accessible. And this in return reduces the distance of travel. And if there is travel, it's typically by sea or road freight, unless it's in dire circumstances when they will then use air travel. The third thing that I would like to touch on when it comes to their environmental objectives, and this is something that I really was excited to talk about, is they encourage their partners to develop biodiversity plans to contribute to the protection of the natural environments where they race. So as I said, this is something that I was excited to talk about, and it really piqued my interest because if you don't know, I'm a huge Extreme E fan, and this is something that in every single location Extreme E races in, they ensure that they are contributing to the protection of the biodiversity of the regions that they race in. And I will get into more of that in a moment. Let's go back to Formula One. So for the Vegas GP, Formula One did take water conservation measures in order to help with the local Southern Nevada drought crisis. They worked alongside of the Southern Nevada Water Authority, MGM Resorts, and WaterStart. As I mentioned, Southern Nevada is in a state of drought, and this has been federally declared, while Formula One is racing in this new place and kind of disrupting the flow of the community. I'm sure there's already controversy behind it, but to mitigate some of that, they had to ensure that they were taking steps to help reduce the impact that they would be bringing onto this community. Alongside of the partners that I mentioned earlier, they essentially installed an atmospheric water generator to capture water vapor that would otherwise be considered waste and return it back into the system. This has been intended to offset the expected outdoor water usage throughout the entire race weekend, and it was deemed as a successful trial. Other ways that we've seen Formula One implement plans for the protection of the natural environments of the places they race in is, one, we see the Dutch Grand Prix year in and year out. Fans will all ride their bikes to the location instead of using cars. This is something that has been going on for many years, and in their impact report, they mentioned that over 85% of their promoters offered greener ways to reach the race compared to 70% in 2022. Now, while I'm happy that they are implementing these measures, something that was just niggling, it was just bothering me, was the Monaco Grand Prix. I just feel like every single measure that they're taking to offset their carbon footprint when it comes to fans traveling to races is kind of null and void after Monaco. The amount of energy that is put in when it comes to the Monaco Grand Prix from fans and superstars alike, and Formula One itself, it's a lot. And I would love to know more about how they're going to navigate this when it comes to 2030, if I'm going to be honest. As I mentioned earlier, I'm a huge fan of Extreme E. I love everything that they stand for. They have gender neutral racing. Their championship slogan is quite literally race for the planet. The places that they race in are intended to highlight the effects of climate change and how Extreme E intends to be part of the solution. As we know, Extreme E is going to turn into Extreme Hydrogen in 2025, but that's for another video. But what I really love from Extreme E, aside of what I've just mentioned earlier, is their legacy program. They don't just say it, but they actually do it as well. So this legacy program is something that they implement in every single region that they race in, and they provide essentially social support for the social environmental challenges at each racing location. For example, in Scotland this year, they worked alongside the Neath District Salmon Fishery Board, which is a non-profit organization that is dedicated to conserving and enhancing the aquatic environment of the River Neath and its tributaries. So essentially, their primary objective is to protect and enhance the river's fish populations, improve water quality, and create sustainable fishing opportunities for local communities. Now, you might be asking, what does this have to do with Formula One? And I'm here to tell you exactly what it has to do with Formula One. It's two completely different racing series I'm talking about, so what do they have in common? Well, last year, a certain former driver by the name of Sebastian Vettel took all the drivers out in Japan for the buzzing corner. And this is kind of similar to the legacy program-esque thing that Extreme E does. This Buzzing Corner was an initiative to promote biodiversity. Sebastian Vettel got all the drivers involved in it. And while I understand that Formula One, like and Extreme E, like I said, are two completely different series, and that the drivers in Formula One have jam-packed race weekends, having something like this implemented in Formula One, I think would not only just be amazing, but it would also really just be impactful as well. It's just an idea I'm throwing out. I think maybe if they can't do it every race weekend, maybe like at least if once a year, if they could choose a country to highlight the importance of biodiversity and to do something like the Buzzing Corner, that would be wonderful. But hey, just an idea. While doing my research for this video, I had to make sure that I found some peer-reviewed articles as well. And in this, I came across an article from Annals of Leisure named Green Light or Black Flag, Greenwashing Environmental Sustainability in Formula One and Formula E. Again, I'm probably not the best person to speak on this. As I said, it's not my area of expertise, but there were some points that I found interesting and it would be remiss of me not to bring them up for this video. One key thing that stood out to me was the environmental impact that these Grand Prix impose on the regions that they race in. So in the article, they mentioned how the Australian Grand Prix in Albert Park actually negatively impacts upon the ecosystem and detracts from the public use of green space for approximately 3 months each year. They also mentioned how the Korean Grand Prix required the clearing of 1,000 acres of rice paddies in a rural, remote, and relatively poor South Jeolla province. Now we know in 2021, despite securing a contract with Formula One, due to criticism, plans to destroy a forest in Rio de Janeiro for a new track there was abandoned. Now, of course, I understand that the onus does not just lie on F1, it also does lie on the local governments of those regions as well. And I do understand the economic impacts that Formula One can bring into these regions. I just think we have to be a bit more mindful of the environmental impacts having races in some of these regions leaves as well. So that is some of their environmental objectives. As we just talked about the legacy program of Extreme E and the Buzzing Corner that Formula One did last year with Sebastian, I generally do think that implementing some things like this would be really beneficial for the sport. It would put the sport in quite a positive light as well, I'm not going to lie. But I do have to say, when it comes to their environmental changes and objectives that they are making, it is evident to see that they are looking for ways to reduce their carbon footprint in the long run to achieve the net zero by 2030 goal. And while some people might call it greenwashing, especially some of the companies they work with, I think it's important to highlight the positive changes that they are making while also being able to critique some of the contradictions as well. Let's move on from their environmental objectives to their social objectives. In that same policy statement that I mentioned earlier on, Formula One mentioned that they will create a diverse pool within Formula One to eliminate disparities in gender and ethnicity representation. They will invest in education programs designed to engage the next generation and stimulate participation of students from diverse backgrounds. They will implement outreach programs to empower underrepresented talent, and they will promote diversity and inclusion across their platforms. So the social objective is another thing that made me want to make this video, and it's one of the main reasons why I actually started my channel to begin with, is not just to speak on races, but to speak on the diversity within the sport as well. Without even looking at the 2023 impact report, I can say that this is an area where I have seen change in. And while I am still hoping for a female Formula One driver, from what I've witnessed, I can say that progression is happening, and you know, we can only hope, right? So what has Formula One done in the past few years to stay true to their social objectives? Well, we saw the launch and the unfortunate administration of the W Series. While W Series is no more, I do believe that everything they've learned from that brought us to what we have now, which is F1 Academy. And you know me, I'm all for the girls. And as we know, F1 Academy was launched in 2023, and so far, so successful. So the goal of F1 Academy is designed to find and nurture female talent and participation from a young age and their journey into elite motorsport. Additionally, I love the fact that every single team in Formula One does for F1 Academy. They all have their liveries on a car, and they all support a driver, and hopefully this will help with the sustainability of F1 Academy as well. My one qualm in this, and I've mentioned it in another video, is that the cars are just not fast enough. I'm pretty sure Max Verstappen also brought this up as well. When it comes to F1 Academy, he said that there's a big gap from the F1 Academy cars to F4. And that's a lot. If those F1 Academy cars are not fast enough and we're looking to nurture talent in order to have a female racing driver in Formula One by 2030, we need to do something about that. Because it's kind of giving scary hours. I'm sure that that's something that is being looked into, hopefully, and is being worked on, because that is, I do think in order to be in the elite of single-seater sports, you do need to have all the adequate facilities around you, and that includes your car. On top of the launch of F1 Academy, Formula One has also been working alongside specialist organizations to identify young people from underrepresented backgrounds and provide them with access and career opportunities in all aspects of motorsport, not just racing. They've worked with organizations like Aspiring Solicitors, Mission 44, Black Collective of Media in Sport, and with my own eyes through a screen. Why'd I do that? These are things that I have seen Formula One implement and that I've seen to be true. As we know, the crux of F1 is STEM. Without STEM, there really is no Formula One, let's be honest. And in 2023, they worked alongside of 5 leading universities in the UK and in Italy, where they offered their engineering scholarship, which is chef's kiss. I love that. Of course, they do have their charity outreach program. They also have a series on, I'm pretty sure you can find it on F1 TV. I'm pretty sure you can also just find it on YouTube as well. But it's their My Untold series, which is to showcase the variety of different opportunities that are available in Formula One, and also just to highlight and shine a light on the existing diversity that they do have within the sport. If you have not watched their series, I would recommend it because it's quite informative and it's really nice to see as well. So I do think it's safe to say that with every aspect of their social objectives, they have been taking it into consideration and working towards a change that I really hope sticks. Now, we went through environmental objectives, we went through these social objectives. The final objective is their governance. I'm not going to do a deep dive into their governance objectives. I will let you know what they are, and if you'd like to know more about it, again, everything is going to be linked down below for you as well. But the policy statement for the governance is to, 1, implement the sustainability strategy across all business functions in collaboration with the sustainability team, communicate sustainability ambitions and progress both internally and externally, collaborate with international bodies concerned with the regulation, study, and management of the sustainability objectives outlined in this policy, review and improve their event management systems to enhance performance and reduce risks, and finally, report and maintain sustainability metrics and commit to consistently seek establish accreditation and validation. And that's all I have for you today when it comes to the sustainability of Formula One. I love this sport so much. And I really and truly, I was just curious, I'm not gonna lie. That's why I made this video. I was curious, and if you were too, I hope you enjoyed it and I hope you learned something as well. I do think as fans, it is important to know their sustainability efforts. Like I said, as much as we love the racing and as much as we love all the glitz and glamour that comes with Formula One, it is a sport that is quite contentious, and it is a sport that, you know, times are changing and it has to move with times. That's what I believe. And I think they're doing so. Again, people will critique it and they also have every right to critique it, but I do think it's important to highlight the positive changes that they are making as well. So again, I do hope that I broke this down in a more digestible way for you because I know the impact statement is quite long, I'm not gonna lie. You have to go through it thoroughly. It's quite long, but it is very aesthetically pleasing. And if you'd like more information, everything will be down below for you to view. Thank you all for sitting here and watching this video. If you liked it, please feel free to like and subscribe, and I will see you all in the next one. Thank you.